Hi, everybody. Welcome. Sandra Crow here, author of Since Strangling Isn't an Option, and I didn't sign up for this, sandracrow.com. Love to be with you again. Happy to be here with you again. And as you can see in the picture, that is Roger and his dog when he was a puppy, Boots. We were just talking about Boots. How old was Boots there, Roger?
He was he's less than a year old, so probably 2 or 3 months old, probably.
Oh,
Maybe
he's
a little
so
bit more.
delicious. What kind of dog is he?
He's a Patterdale Terrier.
So
So
is he a hunter?
I haven't flicked that switch on him yet, because I think with Patterdales they're a bit notorious that if you flick it, it never comes off again. So
Wow. How do you unflick that switch? How do you flick it or not flick it?
I think, well, if you were to take him ratting or something, I think he'd get the instinct, and then he would do
And
it.
then it would just be there. Yeah.
And then he'd always be looking for it and always trying to escape to do it.
Oh, he is so delicious. I know you just have a great time with him.
He is
So delicious. Show people the other one. The other.
This was him probably 2 or 3 years old there.
He's got great teeth. He's still young, right?
He's about 3 years old, but that's because I raw feed him. I'm a great proponent of raw feeding for cats and dogs. Commercial pet food is one of the biggest causes of disease in commercial pet foods, and it's now got to the stage. I do referral only work. I don't do first opinion practice. I take on the cases everybody else tends to give up on, and I won't take dogs on for cancer or allergies unless they change to raw feeding, because I want my time.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, Roger. So just a moment of bio here, so people have a little bit of background about Roger. Roger Meacock BVSc MRCVS is a fully qualified veterinary surgeon who has established an international reputation for treating animals using a wide range of cutting-edge healing technologies and products. He specializes in taking on cases where more conventional options are offering little hope or are inappropriate or not desired, and to speed up all healing processes, from sports injuries to organ failure and allergies. Most of Roger's work is with horses, although he does treat dogs. And one of the things I want to talk to you today about, Rogers, I'm sure hopefully you'd like to talk about too, is some of these alternative technologies that people don't know about and don't know are available for their vets for particular illnesses. So I'm going to start off, if I may, with a little story, my own alternative healing story.
Yeah.
With a dog I had who, she was a lab mix. She died earlier this year. Her name was Dulce. And Dulce tore her ACL. Yeah. And as you very well know, that's typically, every vet I went to said the only way that you can fix an ACL is through surgery. Well, at this point, she was already fairly old, and she had some kidney issues and some liver issues, and surgery was like not something I wanted to do at that stage in her life. I was really concerned about her ability to survive the surgery well and then heal from the ACL tear. So what we did instead was, and a lot of people didn't even know this is possible for dogs, we did some prolotherapy.
Yeah.
It also did prolozone, and then followed that up with a class 4 laser that I found here. And I live in the Washington D.C. area,
Sure.
and it's kind of not easy to find these lasers around. But I found a vet who had one. That combination totally healed her, and she was able to use. I mean, she was already like 11 or 12, so she was, not going to be running around like crazy like she was younger. But that combination was a healing combination that most people said wasn't even possible to heal a dog with an ACL tear that way, and B, didn't even know about. And that's what I want to focus on with you today. Some of these alternative therapies, the Scenar, I went to your website, I saw Scenar, some of these things that people may not know about that's even possible for healing their dogs. So
Sure.
I want you to talk about give us just a kind of a minute of overview and maybe even example or two of what is possible that a lot of animal owners don't even know what's possible, whether horses or you must do horses and dogs, about what's possible out there for healing and alternative methodologies for healing animals.
Sure. I mean, there is so much out there. You could spend a whole day trying to cover it all, and it's pretty much, if it's available for people, there's probably a vet somewhere who's using it on animals. Coming back to your dog with the ACL, I mean, unfortunately, if you ask a surgeon what the solution is, if he's got a hammer in his hand, he sees everything as a nail.
Right.
And so surgery becomes the only option. And actually, there are plenty of other options for sports injuries, not just ACLs. I use Scenar, which is a Russian device.
Can you say a little bit about that? I saw that on your website. I think is that like a laser? Is it like a class 4 kind of thing, or is it something totally? Does it work completely differently?
It's completely different. Alexander Karasev is the guy who invented it. He did a joint degree in medicine and electronics, and they basically discovered that wherever you get any pathology happening inside the body, you get changes in the electrical properties of the skin. So you can measure the skin properties and find an area on the outside that corresponds almost like a bit like a reflex area to damage deeper in. And then the device puts a signal into the body, and it uses the body's own C fibers, which is part of the nervous system, to trigger the release of neuropeptides, which are the main chemicals involved in all healing processes. And the shape of the waveform going in is actually like a nerve impulse, so it's physiological. And Alexander actually had to develop a component in order to get the proper waveform going in into the body, so that the body recognized it as physiological and responded to it. But the beauty of it is when you put the signal into the body and start the healing processes happening, it changes the parameters of the skin electrical properties. And so the device is very quickly working in a biofeedback loop. So the body is controlling its own treatment in real time. So
I'm sorry. I was thinking when you said it, I was thinking about the Theragem. And I just wondered, do you know about the Theragem?
I know a little bit about it. I mean, there are so many different, devices using frequency, whether it's light or whether it's laser or LEDs or magnetic, microcurrent. There are so many different.
Okay. I just thought it sounded like it's like a similar modality.
But and once you're treating, it decides how long it needs to be in each placement. It decides what the waveform needs to be, whether it needs to be modulated or dampened, what power it needs to be. What are typical like the most typical injuries or maladies that it's best for? I mean, you can use it for anything. You can use it for. I primarily use it for sports injuries in horses because that's what I started off using it for. I actually went on the first training course in the UK that the Russians did over here in 1997. And I was the only vet on the course, and I was asking the Russians if they'd ever used them on animals, and they said no, not really. So I said, is there any reason why not? And they said, no, can't think of a reason why not particularly. We're all mammals. And I said, well, that's my reason as well. I'm going to get one and start using them on animals. So that's basically how it started. So most of my horse work is tendon injuries, ligament injuries, muscle tears. Dogs similarly as well. And I think there are an awful lot of dogs who are being operated on for cruciate injuries. And actually, I think a lot of them have got muscle tears. I don't think it's even a cruciate ligament rupture, or maybe even some of them may be partial tear. And as long as you've got a structure there that has still got some unity of the ligament, then it can heal.
And how quickly does it heal? I know it depends on the extent of the injury. Like with the ACL, tear of my dog, how as an example, how quickly would something like that heal?
I mean, it's still going to take sort of 2 or 3 months. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will speed up the healing process, you know, 2, 3, 4 times the normal speed. So you're still going to have to do an element of rest. And it also depends to a certain degree how frequently you can do treatments as well, because I cover the whole of the UK and I go internationally as well. So I can't always guarantee being able to go back to an area. And sometimes I have inpatients, so they come and stay, and I just keep them in, and I can do some intensive work there, which is better for acute injuries. If they're chronic injuries, a lot of the time, you know, people are coming to me when they've tried other things and they haven't worked. And in chronic situations, the body is already adapted to the injury to a certain degree. So it takes longer for the process to unwind and for the body to recover, because you've got to, you know, go back on all those adaptations that it's been trying to do to allow the horse or the dog to.
So is this, is this kind of your, because I noticed you had a couple different modalities. So the Scenar was one.
Yeah.
The Indiba was another.
Yeah.
A Libar.
The Elibra, yeah, that's a bioresonance kit. So
I'm wondering, like, I'm going to ask you to explain those other ones in just a minute, but I want to just know, what's your do you have like a go-to? Like, there's one that is the Scenar, you're like, I'm going to try this first, because this, I think, is more universal health device, or do you use them all equally?
I tend to use the Scenar as sort of probably my first go-to device, especially for the sports injuries. Probably the more medical, if you like, conditions, you know, kidney, liver, digestive, you know, lung, you know, all those sorts of problems, I would probably tend to use the bioresonance kit more for that, because then I can give ongoing remedy for people to give in between treatments. And sometimes I'll combine that with the Scenar as well, and then supplements. And basically I try and put together a program for whatever is needed. And, you know, so sometimes it means dipping into sort of what's available for people, and sometimes it's just a question of getting the right combination and finding maybe it's not me that's required first. Sometimes it's somebody else. So sometimes my job is just coordinating, getting the right order of things happening for the most efficient response to get, you know, a fastest healing, really.
And do you use muscle testing to do that with dog, like surrogate muscle testing for the dog?
I do use muscle testing more with allergies than anything else, especially sort of looking at feed, or I see a lot of horses with sweet itch, so they're sort of hot and itchy, and sometimes they're reacting to the midges, and sometimes, you know, they're reacting to other feeds as well. So it is just finding, depends what they've already tried maybe as well. You know, if they've already tried homeopathy, then maybe they're not an individual that responds so well to that, or the remedy is a little bit more obscure, and the bioresonance can sometimes find something to match a little bit better, or it's just they need another approach.
So I'm going to ask you about allergies, if I may.
Sure.
Since you mentioned that. So, you know, as humans, we have very elaborate ELISA tests and biosets and NAET and all these ways that all these different ways, muscle testing, blood, that we can test allergies. So, again, this is back to a personal example of mine, my dog example. So I have a dog now. His name is Taco. He's about 18 pounds. He is what we believe, who knows for sure, a Dachshund and Beagle mix. He's a rescue. And he started about a year ago, and it began more progressive, doing this like hacking kind of thing, and then licking, like just licking everything. And he went crazy. And every time that would happen, I would take him to the emergency vet, and they would give him this injection of something called Selenia, which was like a nausea drug, and it would settle his stomach. and he would be okay for a while, and then it would kick up again. And usually if I gave him a bully stick or something like that, it would kick up. So it was, probably food related.
Sure.
So anyway, it got so bad that I ended up having to have him do like a scope. And when the surgeon went in to do the scope, and she pulls out a bunch of stuff, like stuff he'd licked up, dirt and grass and all kinds of stuff in his stomach. And she said, we're diagnosing that he has inflammatory bowel disease.
Yeah.
And she says, he's probably, and this really got me as somebody who knows a fair amount about human allergies. He's probably got allergies. And I said, well, allergies to what? And she said, protein. And I said, well, what kind of protein? She said, we don't know. And so, because she said, so we're going to put him on prednisone, which it's like the last thing I wanted to put my dog on. We're going to put him on prednisone to get the inflammation down, and then put him on a very restrictive diet because we don't know. So my question to you is, are there allergy tests out there for dogs that I could even take for my own dog and other people could have for theirs? And if this were your dog and the vet came back and said it has inflammatory bowel disease, what would you do for that?
I'd want to know what you're feeding it to begin with. Are you feeding a commercial diet? Are you feeding raw, or what are you feeding?
Kind of a combo. I'm feeding some commercial, very natural commercial, and cooked food of mine, and then like raw bones and things like that.
Okay. Basically, with cats and dogs, they're carnivores, so we need to feed them raw meat and bone primarily. And it's a little bit like putting the wrong fuel in a car engine. If we put the inappropriate fuel in, then the engine isn't going to work very well. And it's really that simple with cats and dogs. With a lot of the commercial diets are based on grains, or they've got soya as their protein source because it's cheap. They cook, which of course dogs and cats don't do in the wild, and that it's quite similar to inflammatory bowel disease in people, where you get the small intestine villi and microvilli get damaged, and that then allows proteins and things to pass into the bloodstream and form complexes, and you get sort of an allergic response there. So really the idea is to heal the gut. So I would probably start on maybe a bone broth for a couple of weeks, and then go onto a single protein source of probably chicken. For a dog that sort of size, you're looking at probably a couple of chicken drumsticks or a chicken leg or a couple of chicken legs a day, depending on how active they are. And it's simple as take them out the pack and throw them to them whole, and let them crunch them up and swallow them, and let the digestion work.
But the vet said he's allergic to animal protein like chicken. She told me not to feed him any chicken. You're saying raw chicken would be okay?
How does she know? She hasn't done any tests. She's guessing.
That's exactly my question to her. How do you know this? How are you making a recommendation based on not knowing?
She isn't. She's following a rota. She's following a protocol that's been worked out because they end up then selling meds and drugs. So
what do we have available as animal? Are there tests out there for other people whose dogs or even horses for that matter that may have allergies? Are there other tests that people can have their dogs take?
I don't know.
Is there a dog ELISA test?
I don't know how reliable they are.
That's what she said. They're not very reliable. So
I have my doubts too, because and really that's sort of missing the problem. The problem isn't the fact that they've got an allergy to the protein. The fact is the protein is getting in contact with the blood and causing an allergic response because the digestive tract isn't complete anymore. It's compromised.
Okay.
So what we need to do is heal the gut, and then they'll be able to tolerate food, because by the time it's digested, they're only just getting amino acids and the breakdown of the digested food going across, which is what they're supposed to have anyway, and you're not getting larger complexes which set up these immune reactions. So it's all about healing the gut. And the allergy side of it is a bit of a red herring in a way. It's looking too far down the chain. It's not looking at what the fundamental cause of the problem is, and that is that the fact that the gut isn't intact.
Is this a common problem in dogs?
It is massive because most dogs are on commercial pet food, which are based on grains, and of course we know from humans with gluten and that, you know, it's not great for us as omnivores. So let alone for dogs and cats as carnivores. I mean, one of my great things is if people are wondering what to feed, just think about, you know, Richard Attenborough's or you know, the Planet Earth or any of the nature programs that you see about animals in the wild. And if they don't do it in the wild, we don't need to do it for them. So, you know, cats and dogs don't attack wheat fields, they don't dig vegetables, and they don't sit around the campfire cooking. So we don't need to do all those things for them. And there's been lots of scare stories, lots of misinformation being put out to encourage people to, you know, to be worried that they're not capable of working out for themselves what to feed their dogs. And pet food companies have done it for you, and it's a complete food, and that's all you need to give. And it is purely based on chasing the dollar. It is all about that. Just like for humans. Yeah, absolutely. And on the pet side, you know, a lot of the companies which own the pet food companies, Mars, Palmolive, Colgate, Nestle, you know, they own all the little brands. And the reason being they own lots of brands is people will change brands, but then still stay with the parent company. So they've got a better chance of holding on to people if they have multiple brands. And then they can also justify different price levels according to what people think they're buying, but it's all rubbish.
So the best way to heal the gut for animals, for dogs in particular, is to give them bone broth.
Same as people.
Just like people. But yeah. if they are in fact having trouble digesting proteins and you give them a bone broth, isn't that going to be hard to digest also?
No, it's really easy to digest because you're giving it, it's very slow cooked. You're getting the nutrients have pretty well already been broken down. You know, once you sort of made it into a good old soup, once you've cooked it up for a few hours, and just use a single protein source. So just start with chicken or lamb breast, or, you know, lamb or something to begin with, and
you give it to them in between meals, or that is the meal.
That is the meal. That is. Won't
they be hungry? It's just like liquid. Won't they be hungry?
They get loads of nutrients from it. You'd be surprised, you know, if you have a smoothie for lunch, you don't feel hungry in the afternoon.
How many days or weeks would you do it for?
Probably a couple of weeks. Depends on how bad how bad reaction they're getting, or whether what symptoms they're having, I suppose, as to how bad how long you'd need to carry on. But the gut heals pretty quickly. You know, it's one of those organs that turns over very fast, so it doesn't take long to increase it. And then you can also give other supplements like nucleotides, which will help the gut to heal as well.
Oh, you can do that for dogs?
Yeah, absolutely. No reason why not.
Oh, that's cool. All right, well, let's switch gears, and I want to talk a little bit more about, because I think these modalities are just very cool, and I know I haven't heard of them, so I imagine a lot of other people haven't heard of them. So talk to me about some of the other modalities you use here. The Alibar and Indibia and the Russian Health blanket, and maybe even the altitude training. Talk about what are you most excited about right now in terms of those modalities? What's working best for you?
I think the bioresonance, the Libra technology is probably one that's it's more is happening with it, and there's a lot in the pipeline for it as well, because it's sort of homeopathy, bioresonance crossed with radionics, really. So you can use it for distance healing, you can use it for distance treatment, and
how when you say distance, you mean like other cities, or you mean like across the room? What's the distance?
Anywhere in the universe.
Oh, that kind of distance.
Absolutely.
No distance. So can you give me an example of like how you used it, a time when you used it, where you were, where the other being was, and how it kind of unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, I trained as a conventional vet, so when I swapped over to doing this sort of alternative side of stuff, I had almost like a baptism of fire. I learned an awful lot in a very short period of time. And although I knew about frequency stuff, and I knew in theory you could do distance healing, and I knew about people who did radionics and all that sort of thing, there was a bit of me that just needed a bit of confirmation that it was possible. And I had one situation where I treated a horse quite successfully using the Scenar for a condition called grass sickness, which is frequently fatal for horses. And we had a very good result there. And
What kind of a condition is it? Is it like a bone condition?
It causes a colic.
Okay.
So basically their gut stops working. It's a neurotoxin, they think. They're not entirely sure what causes it, but basically the gut stops, and then it just expands and gets very painful, and conventionally they don't know how to kickstart the gut again, and the horses usually end up being euthanized.
Awful.
And it can come in peracute, acute, or chronic form. The chronic, if you don't get to the peracute and acute very, very quickly, you've got no chance of saving them. I was lucky. I got called in to help with the chronic one, and we had a very good result. And the owner then went on the grass sickness forum on the internet and sort of said what a good result we'd had. So somebody phoned me out of the blue and just said, "Look, my horse has got a chronic or an acute grass sickness. What can you do?" And I sort of said, "Well, whereabouts in the world are you?" And she said, "Well, we're right up north in the UK, and I was living in the south." And I said, "Look, I've got work booked for the next couple of days. Much as I'd love to come and rush up there, I can't. But what I can do is I've got a piece of kit, if you're prepared to give it a go, where all I need is the horse's name, date of birth, and the address where the horse is. And then I'll run the program and send you some remedy or send some healing. And if we can keep the horse going for the next few days, then that gives me a chance to get up to you." And so she said, "Yeah, okay, we'll give anything a go." So she texted me through the details of the horse. I put it into the eLibra kit and started running the program. And what it does is it basically looks for an energy signature match of the remedies to see whether you get that resonance with the energy fields of the individual. And when it gets a resonance, it bounces back so that the equipment knows that it's a remedy that's required. And normally when I ran the program at that time for 45 minutes, I'd get perhaps 20 to 30 different remedies.
Wow.
So I ran the program for 45 minutes on this horse, and it came up with over 100 remedies.
Wow.
And I phoned her up and I said, "What's going on?" She said, "The horse has just gone into meltdown. We just actually called the vet and they're coming out to shoot it." And it was like, that was my confirmation that the eLibra had picked up with so many remedies matching that everything was in meltdown, and it was beyond saving. But that was my confirmation from the universe that that the distant stuff worked. I had a correlation. I had a suspicion from what I was seeing, and it was confirmed when I phoned her. So that gave me the confidence then to do distance stuff. And I've got a few clients who you can use hair samples. People sometimes will just send me a hair sample through the post, and you can process it and send the remedy back, and you've never even seen the horse or dog or person, and they come back to you and say, "Yeah, that's worked." Or what we're now developing now is frequency wristbands and frequency devices that you can put on dogs' collars or on horses' blankets or head collars or wherever. And they've got a radio tag with a unique number in there, so we can send a formula direct to that individual, to the tag, and then that will feed it into the energy field. And the long-term element of that is going to be people will be able to dial up on and get different formulae on demand according to what their animals need. So it's a really exciting future that gives owners a bit more control. I mean, some of the formulae are going to be fairly fairly standard. So, you know, if you've got a dog that doesn't travel very well, we've got a travel sickness formula that if they know they're going to go in the car for an hour or 2 hours, they can have the collar on the dog and dial up for the travel sickness formula, and that'll be sent to the dog within 15 minutes on an ongoing basis, updated every 15 minutes. When that's finished, they can, you know, they can go back to an arthritis one or a maintenance one or muscle and tissue or whatever else they need or don't need.
And then they could change 15 minutes later, they could have a different malady, you know, after that.
Yeah.
Does your machine have to be on all the time? You just keep it on all the time so that frequency would always be available to someone?
There's going to be a dedicated server. I mean, there's going to be thousands of these things. Sort of, you know, everything will all be done automated. I mean, I'm not a software engineer, so I just help with working out some of the different formulae. There's another group of people who are working out that whole how to set the other side of it up. But you know, it's all possible.
Do you know anything about, because that just brings up the whole idea of like more, you know, with those frequencies in the air, I just think about more EMFs, and I'm just in you know, going towards the animal. I'm wondering, are animals like humans typically sensitive to EMFs, and could that?
I think they are. I think they are. You know, I mean, be careful where you put your Wi-Fi router in the house. You know, is it right next to your dog bed, or you know, whereabouts? Mine
actually is. It's right next to where my dog sleeps, and I never even thought about that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be susceptible to you know, to those EMF influences, and they've shown now quite categorically that they don't have to be, you know, thermal effects for it to have biological effects. And in some countries have very different regulations over to what levels of EMFs are allowed and not allowed, and you've got some countries in the world which are taking Wi-Fi out of schools and libraries, and they're concerned about where in public buildings they're going to be held and all the rest of it. And then you've got other countries where, you know, they're trying to make hotspots or wire up the whole town to be, you know, on Wi-Fi, and you know, and then the smart meters for gas and electricity and all these sorts of devices. You know, we haven't really evolved quickly. You know, the massive rise in EMFs from all sorts of different sources it's just been so fast. I don't think it's possible for the body to have really fully adapted to it.
Yeah. Tell me about altitude training for dogs. Is that kind of like the equivalent of like a human, like a hyperbaric oxygen chamber? How does that work? It's looked like you were getting some really good results on your website with that.
Those results are actually sort of taken from a human clinic in Switzerland. We haven't done a lot of it with dogs yet. It's something we're sort of trying to get more into. But
do you put them in a chamber? Is there a
it'll be like a little tent, but instead of adding the oxygen in, we actually remove the oxygen. So you're sending them to altitude. So you're encouraging the body to become more efficient at extracting oxygen from the air.
Mm-hmm.
So in theory, it would be quite good for if you've got more oxygen in the body, the cells are not becoming anaerobic as quickly. You're getting less fermentation in the body. It should help with a multitude of different conditions. There's a lot of, in the medical field, people have tended to go towards the hyperbaric, which is the high oxygen level, and that will help in the short term. It will, because you're sort of forcing oxygen into the system, and so it helps with healing on the short term. But long term, it downregulates the body's ability to absorb oxygen.
Really?
So, yeah.
I didn't know that. For humans?
Yeah. So long term, I mean, Michael Jackson, whoever advised him to have oxygen tents and sleep in them, he created a hell of a lot of health issues for himself long term.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't realize that. But then why are athletes doing it? For the short term benefit?
Yeah, they'll do it for short-term injury healing, but if they're going for training, they'll go to altitude. They'll go to Kenya, or they'll go, wherever they can go for higher altitude to train. Yeah.
Is that available? That same concept available for humans, like the high altitude, like a high altitude tent for humans?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. The company that I do some work with, they're putting in primarily they're putting the systems into gyms and things, but they have had businessmen who've put them into their bedrooms so that they're sleeping at altitude because it enhances their oxygenation ability during the day, and then they think they're making better decisions because they're more alert. Which sort of makes sense. And if they can exercise more easily and all those sorts of things, then that's also going to be better for the body. So
but we're not there yet with animals. It sounds like it's kind of a new frontier with animals.
It is relatively new. Yeah, I mean, there are probably a few people using it for performance enhancement, but there aren't many people yet, as far as I'm aware, using it or looking at it for health benefits. But it will happen. It will happen. I'm sure.
It will happen. God, what's a very cool concept for humans and for animals. Tell me about Indiba, and also about the Russian health blanket. How are those used?
Okay, the Russian healing blanket's got an amazing history. Is
it like an earthing blanket? Like, do you plug it in, or is it independent?
No, it's actually an independent. It reflects the body's own energies back onto itself, so that the body gets it and isolates the body from external electromagnetic interference. So it recreates the energy shielding that happens at night, because we heal better at night because we're not getting interference from the sun. Because the brain actually communicates with cells in the sort of 300 nanometer wavelength, and that's the wavelength that we get a lot of radiation from the sun. So the body heals better at night because we're not getting that interference, and the brain can communicate better with the cells and tell them what to do. And the reason why DNA is a helix is because it acts better as an aerial. So what the healing blanket does is it isolates the body from external influences and reflects the wavelengths that instruct the cells how to heal themselves. They would get reflected back onto the body. So it's working on a number, and it redistributes surface electric charge. So the acupuncture points effectively act as energy sinks and rebalance the meridians over time as well. So it's a pretty cool concept. It was sort of developed based on the original work of Wilhelm Reich, who did his orgone accumulator, and of course he was jailed and conveniently died for the authorities the day before he was being released. So he did some original work in Denmark in the 1930s, and then when the Second World War came along, the Russians went back to Russia and Wilhelm Reich went to the States, and in Russia they basically looked at building a similar sort of piece of kit that did this orgone accumulation, and then looked at the physiological responses that happened within the body and worked out a simpler method of recreating those physiological responses, and that was the resulted in the healing blanket. But,
and what kinds of issues have you seen people use it for?
I mean, they've used it for lots of different conditions. I use it for myself when you can get a much quicker recovery. So if I'm on the road a lot and I've only got a couple of hours sleep before I can turn around, if I sleep in the blanket for an hour or two, it's like I've had 5 or 6 hours sleep. So
is there a detoxification element to it when that happens?
I mean, it's got everything's got that potential. Depends how toxic the body is to begin with. But yeah, I mean, if you're getting the body to function properly and getting organs functioning properly, then potentially, the liver and kidneys and the skin, which are the main organs of detox, are gonna chuck out whatever they can.
And have you used it on animals as well?
Yeah, I've had a prototype made up as a horse blanket, but I haven't actually launched it yet. And part of the problem is the Russian company who were making them, they sold out. So they're not making them anymore. But I know I've got a contact in Russia who's knows which company made the active layer. So in theory, we could get it going again. But yeah, so there are some copycat healing blankets out there, but they, to my knowledge, aren't using the same active layer that the original technology and research was done on.
Wow, that's really cool. I hadn't heard about that. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like an earthing blanket, only instead of using from the earth, the elements of the earth for healing, or using your own, you're like reflecting that back to yourself, and you're using your own internal elements for healing. So
yeah, I mean, it goes right. The ancient history of it basically goes back to the Ark of the Covenant, which wasn't just a box carrying the Ten Commandments around. It's a communication healing chamber, and in Exodus, it gives the dimensions and materials used. And part of that whole sort of Inquisition era was when people were starting to become a little bit more literate outside the church, and were decided that they could build something similar. And so the Roman Catholic Church went around Europe looking for people who were heretics, who were trying to recreate what was already in the, been described in the Bible. And that was the basis of, obviously, people got fairly discouraged by that. And people didn't try it again for a while. And Wilhelm Reich got interested in that whole idea again. And that was sort of the idea behind it originally.
Wow, it's amazing that it's that old and we haven't seen elements of that, or places, other places, or that's not more popular.
Well, I mean, people are aware there are orgone institutes in Berlin. I think there's one in New York. So that whole orgone.
Yeah, orgone therapy and all that. And I know people who have orgone chambers and whatnot, but I've never seen it used. I mean, essentially, it's an orgone healing blanket, right?
Yeah,
so
it is. Yeah. I mean, some people produce their own versions of it. The Russian one, saying, part of the problem following the Cold War is there's still a lot of suspicion about what comes out of Russia, even though a lot of the medical trials are actually done in those countries. So, in what was former USSR, because it's cheap to do it. So on one level, they'll use those countries and their people to form trials, but then anything that comes out that's slightly on the opposite foot, they'll rubbish it because of where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of politics involved, as unfortunately, and that's why it hasn't been very well thought of and
popularized.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK now, it's so difficult to make claims about anything without being hauled over the coals and accused of all sorts.
Well, here too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about one other thing I want to ask you about, the Indiba.
Yeah, it's used quite a lot in Italy, and it's developed in Spain. It uses electric current, so it's either using a resistive or a capacitive current, and it basically helps to reset the electrical potentials of the cells and get them to function properly. Used a lot for sports injuries, tendons, ligaments. What
does it look like? Is it like a little, like a Scenar type size? Like,
no, it's big. It's probably I don't use it very much, simply because it's of the space you need almost to set it up. And if you're going to work with a horse, you need two or three people there, one to control the horse and two people using the kit and making sure that the horse doesn't get tangled up in electrical cables, and obviously horse and water and electricity don't mix very well at times. So you've just got to be really careful about how it's all set up. So if I had a clinic, specific vet practice, instead of working out the back of my car, which is what I tend to do, then you could have it as a permanent setup, and it'd be much easier to use on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, I've got to take it around and set it up everywhere I go. It's easy to do it with a Scenar, to be honest. So
with all these different modalities, what's your what's your message to people? Is it that we can think differently about healing some of these traditional injuries in kind of a new and inventive ways with a different kind of diet and then some of these modalities? What is it that you want people to know about alternative healing as it applies to animals, horses and dogs in your case in particular, and then anything else like a bigger kind of message that you want to put out, you know, for yourself personally, your own healing mission that you want to put out to the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, we're all mammals at the end of the day, unless you're obviously a snake. But you know, we're all functioning on vibration. We're still all made up of the same atoms, and the frequencies are all, you know, there's a common element to all of that, really. And so it's all possible. You know, there's groups in Bulgaria now, and they're firing lasers through pharmaceuticals onto CDs. And taking the information from the pharmaceutical drug onto a CD. You can then email it to someone across the world. They can then download it onto another CD-ROM, put a glass of water on it, and it'll get transfer of information from the CD-ROM into the glass of water. And you can drink it as if you're having a pharmaceutical in a much lower dilution and without all the harmful side effects. So
wow! Where? How do you do that? Who's doing that? I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, there's IC Medical, I think .com, I think their website is. Yeah, amazing stuff, and that's
IC Medical. I got to write that down. That's really cool. Is that the future of? Is that for animals as well as people?
You can use it for anything. Absolutely. You know, it's just a different way of, you know, same as we can do with the Libra technology and send the frequencies through the airwaves. You can just as easily email them. You could have them on a downloadable format and send them anywhere in the world. It's when you're in the vibratory realm, really, there is no limit. You know, there is no distance. You know, look into quantum physics and your entanglement and all those sorts of things. It's, you know, everything is interlinked. You know, we're all part of the same world, all part of the same universe, and part of the same consciousness. We just don't realize it yet. So we're all hooked into it. We've just got to recognize how to use that, really. And it's
how much of, can I ask you just because it sounds like a good part of your practice is you like in your car kind of going to a horse or a dog and kind of dealing with them with all the devices that you have. How much of your practice is currently long distance, people from anywhere else in the world where you're actually using these healing modalities to heal?
Not a lot. I know that to a certain degree, you know, the reason why we're doing this day to day is to get awareness of what's possible out there, and to a certain degree, you've got to meet people where they're at. And
are you saying that because people's belief systems haven't completely grasped that, taken that on, so they don't take advantage of it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's part of it. You know, there is so much information, disinformation put out to that all these things aren't possible and that they're not scientific and there's no proof behind them. And people, there's an awful lot of sheep there. People follow what they're told to believe. So, you know, there are obviously people who are thinking outside the box, who are listening into what we're doing today and understand it, and doing similarly good stuff as well. You know, I haven't got the monopoly on it, and nobody's got the monopoly on it by any means. So, you know, there are so many different ways that frequency can be used. You know, you've got the Theragen using the lights. You've got direct electrical current. You've got lasers, you've got LEDs, you've got sound. I mean, there's people using sound therapy. There are so many different ways that frequency vibration. You look at Massimo Emoto and all those messages from water. You know, you can put frequency into water. They reckon you can store all the information on the earth in a glass of water. The only thing they haven't quite worked out yet is how to withdraw it again. But, you know, it's coming. You know, the science is catching up with what some of us have been using, and it is getting people to recognize that actually, you know, the allopathic paradigm actually doesn't fully understand everything it does either. Yet they'll have us believe that, you know, drugs aren't trialed on drugs for old people on the whole aren't trialed on old people. They're trialed on young healthy people, and then wonder why they have adverse effects on older people. You know, they're not trialed in combinations. They actually only worked out how the mechanism for penicillin actually worked in 2014. So there's a lot that modern medicine thinks it knows, but it doesn't. And there are changes in paradigms happening the whole time. I had a good friend of mine from school, actually went to vet school as well, visiting me yesterday, and he was saying to me that the half-life of information in the medical world is 7 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, things are changing, and that is speeding up as science is progressing. And, you know, what we thought was once definitely true, we now know is definitely not true. And stuff that we thought was impossible, we're now going, well, actually, yeah, of course you can do that.
And I want to thank you, Roger, for you know, being a pioneer in this world and really holding the torch of possibility for other ways of healing for animals and for humans as well. So thank you for that. Just to give people your website, if you would, please, if they want to get back in touch with you, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up as you do this.
Yeah, my website is naturalhealingsolutions.co.uk. Or if you
want me to just say that again? That's naturalhealingsolutions.co. That's co.uk.
Yeah.
If you want to get back in touch with Roger and find out more about these modalities and how they may be applicable for them and their own pets.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Roger, for sharing your mission, your vision, and some of these really unique and outside the box and very cool discoveries. And thank you for sharing that with us. And we'll look forward to seeing more of that in the future. And thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for leading the interview.
My pleasure.